The ledger fell from Eleanor Donovan's trembling hands, scattering papers across the dusty floor of the Wells Fargo office in Kingston, Nevada, and she knew in that instant her life would never be the same. It was August of 1878, and the dry heat of the desert evening pressed against the windows as she stared at the columns of numbers that revealed a corruption so deep it reached all the way to the territorial governor himself. Her employer, Mr. Cornelius Hayes, had been skimming money from miners' claims, bribing land office officials, and stealing water rights from homesteaders who barely had enough to survive. The evidence was irrefutable, written in his own meticulous hand, and Eleanor had stumbled upon it while searching for a simple freight invoice. She dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the papers, her heart hammering against her ribs. The office was silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock and her own ragged breathing. Eleanor had worked as Hayes's bookkeeper for 2 years, ever since her father died in a mining accident and left her with nothing but debts. At 23, she had few options in a town where women were expected to marry or work in establishments she would never set foot in. Hayes had seemed like a godsend, offering decent wages and respect, but now she understood the truth. Every comfortable word, every kind gesture had been a mask hiding a monster. The front door creaked open, and Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Heavy footsteps crossed the outer office, and she recognized the gate immediately. Hayes had returned, and she was trapped with evidence of his crimes scattered around her like autumn leaves. "Miss Donovan?" His voice carried that false warmth she now heard so clearly. "I thought you had gone home for the evening." Eleanor shoved the papers into her satchel with shaking hands, standing just as Hayes appeared in the doorway. He was a portly man in his 50s, with thinning hair and watery blue eyes that now fixed on her with sudden suspicion. His gaze dropped to the satchel, then to the open safe behind her desk, and his expression transformed from confusion to cold fury. "What are you doing with my private files?" The warmth had vanished entirely from his voice. "I was looking for the freight invoices from last week," Eleanor said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded despite the terror coursing through her veins. "Mr. Patterson needs them for his accounts." Hayes moved closer, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Those files were locked in my safe. You had no business opening it." "The combination was written in your desk calendar," she said, clutching the satchel tighter. "I assumed you meant for me to access it when needed." His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist with bruising force. "Give me the satchel. Let go of me." Eleanor tried to wrench free, but his grip only tightened. "You stupid girl, do you have any idea what you have seen? What you have done?" His other hand reached for the bag, and Eleanor did the only thing she could think of. She brought her knee up hard into his stomach, and Hayes doubled over with a gasp. She ran. The evening streets of Kingston were busy with miners finishing their shifts and families taking advantage of the cooler air. Eleanor pushed through the crowds, her satchel banging against her hip, not daring to look back. She had no plan, no destination, only the desperate need to get away. Behind her, she heard Hayes shouting, calling for the sheriff, and her heart sank. Sheriff Tom Bradley was in Hayes's pocket, one of the names prominently featured in the ledgers. She could not go to the law. She could not go home. Hayes would know to look there first. Eleanor ducked into an alley between the general store and a saloon, pressing herself against the wall as her mind raced. She needed help, needed someone who was not tangled in Hayes's web of corruption. The problem was that web stretched wide in Kingston. Hayes had his fingers in nearly every business, every official position. Who could she trust? The sound of horses drew her attention, and she peered around the corner to see 3 riders coming down the main street. Even in the fading light, she could see they were cowboys, probably heading into town after weeks on a cattle drive. One of them caught her eye immediately. He sat tall in the saddle, his dark hair visible beneath a worn hat, and something about the easy confidence in his posture made her move without thinking. She stepped out of the alley directly into their path, and the lead rider pulled his horse up short. "Help me," Eleanor said, looking up at the man with dark hair and striking green eyes. "Please, I am in terrible danger." The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before he registered that she was unarmed and clearly frightened. "What kind of danger, miss?" "My name is Eleanor Donovan, and I have evidence of corruption that reaches to the highest levels of the territory. The man I worked for discovered I know, and now he will kill me to keep it secret." The words tumbled out in a rush. "The sheriff is involved. I have nowhere to go." The cowboy exchanged glances with his two companions, both older men who regarded Eleanor with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion. "That is quite a story," one of them said slowly. "Isaac, we should not get involved in local troubles," the other added, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. So the dark-haired cowboy was Isaac. Eleanor looked at him with desperate eyes. "I know it sounds mad, but it is the truth. Please, just help me get out of town. I need to reach Carson City, to people who are not under Hayes's influence." Isaac Quinn studied her face for a long moment, and Eleanor had the unsettling sensation that he could see straight through to her soul. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with the lean, weathered look of a man who spent his life outdoors. His jaw was shadowed with several days of stubble, and there was a scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him more handsome rather than less. "Carson City is 3 days' hard ride from here," he said finally. "You have a horse?" "No." "Supplies?" "Just what I am wearing and this satchel." Isaac's mouth quirked slightly, not quite a smile. "You are asking a lot of a stranger, Miss Donovan." "I know." Eleanor's voice broke despite her best efforts. "But you are the first person I have seen who does not bear the mark of this town's rot. I can pay you when we reach Carson City. My aunt lives there and she has means. Please." Behind them, Eleanor heard shouting. Hayes had organized a search party. Isaac heard it too, his eyes sharpening as he assessed the situation. For a heartbeat, Eleanor thought he would refuse, would mount his horse and ride away from her problems. Instead, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Ben, give her your horse," Isaac said to one of his companions. "Take mine into town and sell both animals. Buy 3 fresh horses and supplies. Tell anyone who asks that we rode west toward California. Then catch up with us. We will take the northern trail toward the mountains." Ben started to protest, but something in Isaac's expression stopped him. "You are making a big mistake, son." "Probably," Isaac agreed. "But I have never been good at walking away from someone in need." He turned to Eleanor and held out his hand. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then let us move before your former employer finds us having this conversation." Within minutes, Eleanor found herself mounted on Ben's sturdy bay gelding, following Isaac as he led his own horse out of town at a casual pace that belied the urgency of their situation. They did not run. Running would draw attention. Instead, they moved like any other travelers departing Kingston for the evening, and Eleanor forced herself to breathe normally despite the terror still coursing through her. They had just reached the edge of town when Sheriff Bradley and 4 deputized men rounded the corner behind them. "You there?" the sheriff called. "It's... Stop!" Isaac did not even look back. "Keep riding," he said quietly to Eleanor. "Nice and steady." "Isaac Quinn?" The sheriff's voice was closer now, and Eleanor's hands tightened on the reins. "I need to speak with that woman." Isaac finally turned in his saddle, his expression mild. "Evening, Sheriff. Is there a problem?" "That woman is wanted for theft. She stole valuable documents from her employer." Bradley had ridden up alongside them now, his florid face sweating in the evening heat. "Hand her over, and there will be no trouble for you." "What is your name, Sheriff?" Isaac asked conversationally. "Bradley, Tom Bradley. Now hand over the woman." "Well, Sheriff Bradley, I have a problem with your request." Isaac's voice remained pleasant, but Eleanor saw his posture shift slightly, saw the way his hand rested casually near his gun. "You see, this lady approached me asking for escort to Carson City. She is traveling to visit family. That is not a crime as far as I know." "She's a thief." "Says who?" The man making the accusation. Isaac shook his head. In my experience, when powerful men start throwing around charges against young women, it is usually because those women know something they should not. Bradley's face darkened. You are interfering with the law. I am exercising my right to travel freely with whomever I choose. Isaac's pleasant tone had developed an edge. Now, unless you have a warrant signed by a judge, I suggest you let us be on our way. The sheriff's hand moved toward his weapon, and Eleanor's breath caught. But Isaac was faster. His revolver cleared leather with practiced ease, leveled not at Bradley, but at the ground between them. I would not do that if I were you, Sheriff. I have no desire to shoot a lawman, but I will defend myself and this lady, if forced. The moment stretched taut as wire. The deputized men looked uncertain, probably townsmen unused to gunfights. Bradley's face worked through several expressions before settling on impotent rage. Hayes will hear about this. There is nowhere you can run where he will not find you. Then I guess we had better keep moving. Isaac holstered his gun with the same fluid motion he had drawn it. Good evening, Sheriff. He touched his heels to his horse's flanks, and Eleanor followed suit, half expecting a bullet in her back. But the shot never came. They rode out of Kingston as the desert twilight deepened into full dark, and Eleanor realized she was shaking so hard she could barely hold the reins. Easy, Isaac said after they had put several miles between themselves and the town. We are clear for now. You drew on a sheriff for me, Eleanor said, her voice unsteady. You do not even know if I am telling the truth. Isaac glanced at her, his face shadowed in the starlight. Are you? Yes, every word. Then I made the right choice. He pointed ahead to where the land began to rise toward distant mountains. There is a place about 10 miles north where we can make camp. We will rest there until Ben catches up with fresh horses and supplies. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the night creatures beginning their songs. Eleanor's mind churned with everything that had happened, with the enormity of what she had done and what Isaac had risked for her. She studied his profile in the darkness, trying to understand what kind of man would face down a corrupt sheriff for a complete stranger. Why did you help me? She asked finally. Isaac was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. My father was a homesteader in Texas, he said eventually. Tried to build a ranch with honest work and honest dealing. When I was 12, a land speculator decided he wanted our water rights. He had the law in his pocket, had everyone in his pocket. My father fought back and they killed him for it. Made it look like an accident. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Eleanor heard the old pain beneath it. My mother and I lost everything. I have had a particular hatred for corrupt men in power ever since. I am sorry, Eleanor whispered. It was a long time ago. Isaac turned to look at her, and even in the darkness she could feel the intensity of his gaze. But when I saw you standing there, terrified, but still fighting, still brave enough to ask for help, I saw my father. Saw everyone who ever stood up against crooked men with too much power. I could not walk away from that. Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. I know that is inadequate, but thank you. You can thank me when we get you safely to Carson City. Isaac's tone lightened slightly. Right now, save your breath for riding. We have a long night ahead. They reached the camping spot Isaac had mentioned, a small canyon with a spring that provided water for the horses. Isaac would not allow a fire despite the chill that came with full darkness. Too visible, he explained. Hayes probably has men out looking for us already. They sat with their backs against sun-warmed rocks, sharing a canteen and some jerky Isaac had in his saddlebag. Eleanor had not realized how hungry she was until she started eating, and Isaac gave her most of his portion without comment. The stars overhead blazed with a clarity that never ceased to amaze her, the Milky Way a river of light across the sky. Tell me about the corruption, Isaac said quietly. What exactly did you find? Eleanor pulled the satchel closer, protective. ledgers showing years of embezzlement, bribery, and fraud. Hayes has been stealing from miners, manipulating land claims, and paying off officials throughout the territory. He has even been doctoring assay reports, telling prospectors their claims are worthless and buying them out for pennies, then turning around and selling the real reports to big mining companies for fortunes. Isaac let out a low whistle. That is enough to put him in prison for life if the right people see it. If the right people see it, Eleanor echoed. That is why I need to reach Carson City. My aunt's husband is a newspaper editor. He has connections to honest officials in the territorial government. If anyone can expose Hayes, he can. Hayes will not let that evidence reach Carson City without a fight. I know. Eleanor drew her knees up to her chest, suddenly feeling the full weight of her situation. I have put you in terrible danger. He will come after you now, too. Let him. There was something almost eager in Isaac's voice. I have been drifting for years, working cattle drives and odd jobs, never staying anywhere long. Maybe it is time I stood for something again. They talked through much of the night, Eleanor sharing her story and Isaac sharing his. She learned that he had been working as a cowboy since he was 14, that he had seen most of the Western territories, that he could read and write thanks to a mother who valued education above almost everything. He was thoughtful and funny by turns, and Eleanor found herself relaxing in his presence despite everything. What will you do after Carson City? Isaac asked as the stars began to fade toward dawn. When Hayes is exposed and you are safe? Eleanor had not let herself think that far ahead. I do not know. Start over somewhere, I suppose. Find work as a bookkeeper or teacher. Try to build a life that does not involve looking over my shoulder. That sounds lonely. It does, Eleanor admitted. But I have been alone since my father died. I am accustomed to it. Being accustomed to something does not make it right. Before Eleanor could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching. Isaac was on his feet instantly, gun drawn, positioning himself between Eleanor and the sound. But it was only Ben leading 3 horses and looking irritated. Found you, he said without preamble. Figured you would head for the spring. Got the horses and supplies like you asked. Also got information. He dismounted and began transferring saddlebags to the fresh horses. Hayes has put a $500 bounty on both your heads, dead or alive, though he is telling people he wants you alive for trial. Half the territory will be hunting you. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. $500 was a fortune, more than most men made in 2 years. Isaac, this is insane. You should leave me. Take your share of the money from the horse sale and go. Not a chance, Isaac said calmly, already checking the supplies Ben had brought. We leave within the hour. Ben, are you heading back to the ranch? Already turned in my notice, Ben said, and Eleanor saw the grudging respect in his eyes as he looked at Isaac. Figured if you are fool enough to go up against a land baron and his private army, I am fool enough to help. Besides, I never liked being told what to do by corrupt lawmen. I cannot ask you to risk your life for me, Eleanor protested. You are not asking, Ben replied. I am choosing. There is a difference. He looked at Isaac. But we need a better plan than just running. Hayes has resources. He can chase you all the way to Carson City and beyond. I know. Isaac studied the eastern horizon, where dawn was beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. We need to get creative, make him divide his forces, slow him down. He turned to Eleanor. Those ledgers, do they implicate anyone between here and Carson City? Eleanor thought for a moment. Yes, there is a mine foreman in Silver Springs, about halfway to Carson City. According to the records, he has been helping Hayes falsify safety reports and pocket the money that should go to reinforcing tunnels. 3 men died in a collapse last spring because of it. Perfect. Isaac's smile was not pleasant. We are going to Silver Springs. If we can turn some of Hayes's allies against him, create chaos in his organization. It will buy us time and protection. They rode hard through the morning, keeping to rough terrain where their tracks would be difficult to follow. Isaac set a punishing pace, but Eleanor kept up without complaint. She had grown up in Nevada, had learned to ride before she could properly walk, and the physical challenge was almost welcome after the mental strain of the past 24 hours. Around midday, they stopped briefly to rest the horses and eat. Ben produced hardtack, dried beef, and miraculously, a small bag of apples. Figured you would need real food, he said gruffly when Eleanor thanked him. You are a good man, Ben, she said sincerely. I am a damned fool, he corrected, but his weathered face creased in something like a smile. But I suppose there are worse things to be. They were preparing to mount up again when Isaac suddenly held up a hand for silence. Eleanor froze, listening. At first she heard nothing unusual, just the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. Then she caught it. Voices, and the unmistakable sound of multiple horses moving through the scrub. Riders, Isaac said softly, coming from the south. Could be bounty hunters, could be Hayes's men. Could be innocent travelers, Ben added, though his hand was already on his rifle. We are not taking chances. Isaac helped Eleanor mount, his hands steadying her when her legs trembled with fatigue and renewed fear. There is a ravine about a mile north. We can lose them there if we move now. They rode fast, no longer worried about concealing their tracks. The voices behind them grew louder, and Eleanor risked a glance back to see at least 6 riders cresting a ridge. One of them spotted their group and let out a shout. The chase was on. Isaac pushed his horse to a gallop, and Eleanor leaned low over her mount's neck, urging every ounce of speed from the animal. The ravine Isaac had mentioned came into view, a deep cut in the earth where flash floods had carved away the desert floor. It was treacherous terrain, full of loose rock and sudden drops, but it was also a maze that could hide them if they were clever. They plunged into the ravine without hesitation, Isaac leading the way with the sure-footed confidence of someone who knew wild country. Behind them, the pursuing riders reached the rim and began to descend, more cautiously but still determined. Eleanor could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their search. Isaac dismounted and motioned for Eleanor and Ben to do the same. We lead the horses from here, he whispered. Stay quiet and follow me exactly. They moved deeper into the ravine, picking their way over tumbled boulders and around sudden bends. The walls rose high on either side, blocking the brutal sun but also trapping the heat. Sweat ran down Eleanor's back, and her legs ached from the hard riding, but she kept moving. Behind them, the voices of their pursuers echoed strangely off the rock walls, making it impossible to tell how close they were. Isaac led them to a place where the ravine branched into 3 separate channels. He chose the middle path without hesitation, and they followed it for perhaps a quarter mile before he found what he was looking for. A narrow slot in the rock wall, barely wide enough for a horse to pass through sideways. Through here, he said. It opens up into a hidden basin on the other side. We can wait there until they give up the search. The slot was claustrophobic and dark, the rock walls seeming to press in from both sides. Eleanor's horse balked at entering, and she had to coax it forward step by careful step. She could hear the animals breathing, harsh and frightened, echoing her own fear. But finally they emerged into the basin Isaac had promised, a roughly circular space about 50 feet across with steep walls on all sides and a small pool of spring water in the center. How did you know about this place? Eleanor asked as Isaac helped her unsaddle her horse to let it drink. Used to work cattle in this area a few years back, he replied. We would use this basin as a holding pen when we needed to doctor calves away from the main herd. The only way in or out is that slot, and you would never find it if you did not know it was there. They waited in tense silence as the sounds of the search party echoed through the ravine beyond their hiding place. At one point, the voices came very close, close enough that Eleanor could make out individual words, but the pursuers passed by the hidden entrance without noticing it. Gradually, the sounds faded, and finally there was silence. They will be back, Ben said grimly. Once they realize they lost the trail, they will backtrack and search more thoroughly. True, Isaac agreed. But by then it will be dark, and we can slip out. For now, we rest. The horses need it, even if we do not. Eleanor sank down beside the spring, cupping water in her hands to drink and then splashing it over her face and neck. The water was cool and clean, tasting faintly of minerals. She looked up to find Isaac watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You have done well," he said. "Most people would have panicked back there. You kept your head." "I have had no choice," Eleanor replied. "Panic would mean death for all of us." Still, Isaac sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You are braver than you give yourself credit for." Eleanor turned to look at him properly, really seeing him for the first time since their flight began. Dust and sweat had turned his dark hair several shades lighter, and exhaustion shadowed his eyes, but there was still that core of strength in him, that quiet confidence that made her feel safer than she had in months. "You risked your life for mine," she said softly. "I do not think I can ever repay that. I do not want repayment." Isaac's green eyes held hers. "I want you to be safe. I want the corruption you uncovered to be exposed. I want justice." He paused. "And I want to keep knowing you, Eleanor Donovan, because in the short time since you stepped into my path, I have not been able to stop thinking about you." Eleanor's breath caught. "Isaac, we have known each other barely a day." "I know. It is foolish and irrational." He smiled slightly. "But since when has the heart paid attention to sense? I look at you and I see courage and integrity and determination. I see someone worth fighting for, worth dying for, if it comes to that." "Do not say that." Eleanor's hand found his without her conscious intention. "Do not talk about dying." "Then let us talk about living." Isaac's fingers tightened around hers. "When this is over, when Hayes is exposed and you are safe, would you let me court you properly? Take you to dinner, go for walks, all the normal things people do when they are trying to see if what they feel might grow into something lasting?" Eleanor should have said no. She should have pointed out the impossibility of it, the danger still surrounding them, the fact that they were strangers thrown together by circumstance. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Yes," she whispered. "I would like that very much." Isaac leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. His lips were warm and slightly chapped from the sun, and the kiss tasted of dessert dust and promises. It was over in seconds, but Eleanor felt it all the way to her core. "Well," Ben said from across the basin, his tone studiedly casual, "I am going to check the horses." Loudly. "So you two can pretend I did not just witness that." Isaac laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and Eleanor found herself laughing too, despite everything. The moment of levity was brief but precious, a reminder that even in the midst of danger and desperation, joy could still exist. They left the hidden basin after dark, emerging into a ravine lit only by stars and a sliver of moon. The desert night was cold, a shocking contrast to the day's heat, and Eleanor was grateful for the jacket Ben had thought to include in the supplies. They rode through the darkness with Isaac leading, trusting his knowledge of the land and his horse's instincts. By dawn, they had covered another 20 miles and were approaching the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. The landscape was changing, becoming more rugged and less forgiving. They saw no sign of pursuit, but that did nothing to ease the tension that rode with them like a fourth companion. They reached Silver Springs just before noon on the third day of their flight. It was larger than Kingston, a rough mining town built into a canyon where silver had been discovered 15 years earlier. The mines were still producing, and the town had the bustling, temporary feel of a place where everyone was trying to get rich quick. "We need to be careful here," Isaac said as they approached. "Hayes probably has people watching for us." Then we split up, Eleanor suggested. I can find the mine foreman's office, while you and Ben arrange for supplies and fresh horses. We will be less noticeable that way. Isaac looked unhappy with the idea, but finally nodded. Take this. He handed her a small derringer he pulled from his boot. Do you know how to use it? Yes, my father taught me. Eleanor checked the weapon, feeling its reassuring weight. I will be careful. Be more than careful. Be invisible. Isaac's eyes were intense. Find the foreman. Tell him you have evidence of his involvement with Hayes and offer him a deal. His testimony against Hayes in exchange for leniency. If he refuses, leave immediately. Do not try to force it. They arranged to meet at the edge of town in 2 hours, and then Eleanor was on her own, making her way through Silver Springs with her head down and her heart pounding. She found the mine office easily enough, a rough wooden building near the main shaft entrance. Through the window, she could see a heavy-set man with graying hair sitting behind a desk, poring over documents. Eleanor took a breath and walked in. The man looked up, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to sudden wariness. Can I help you? He asked slowly. Mr. Garrett? Eleanor had memorized the names from the ledgers. My name is Eleanor Donovan. I work, or rather worked, for Cornelius Hayes in Kingston. I have information that you need to hear. The color drained from Garrett's face. I do not know what you are talking about. Yes, you do. Eleanor closed the door behind her and approached his desk. I have Hayes's private ledgers. I know about the falsified safety reports. I know 3 men died because you and Hayes pocketed the money meant for reinforcing the tunnels. I know everything. Garrett stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You need to leave. Now. Or what? You will have me killed like Hayes wants to? Eleanor held her ground. I am offering you a chance, Mr. Garrett. Hayes is going down. The evidence I have will destroy him. You can go down with him, or you can testify against him and maybe, just maybe, save yourself. Hayes will never let it come to trial, Garrett said, but his voice shook. He owns too many people. You are a fool if you think you can beat him. I have to try. Those 3 men who died had families. How many more have to die before someone stands up to him? Eleanor leaned forward. I know you have a wife, Mr. Garrett. I know you have a daughter. Do you want them to watch you hang as an accomplice to murder? Because that is what will happen when this gets out. And it will get out. I am taking these ledgers to Carson City, to people Hayes does not own. Help me, and I will tell them you cooperated. Refuse, and you will face the full weight of justice alone. Garrett sank back into his chair, his face crumbling. I never wanted anyone to die, he said hoarsely. Hayes said the reports were exaggerated, that the tunnels were safe. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the money was good and I was tired of being poor. Then make it right, Eleanor said more gently. Come with us to Carson City. Tell the truth. It will not bring those men back, but it might stop Hayes from killing anyone else. Before Garrett could answer, the door burst open, and 3 men rushed in. Eleanor recognized one of them from Kingston, one of the deputized men who had been with Sheriff Bradley. There she is, he shouted. Eleanor grabbed the ledgers she had set on Garrett's desk and ran, bursting through the back door of the office and into the maze of buildings and equipment that surrounded the mine. Behind her, the men gave chase, shouting for others to join them. She ran blindly, trying to make her way back toward where she was supposed to meet Isaac, but the unfamiliar town confused her, and she found herself trapped in a dead-end alley between 2 warehouses. The 3 men closed in, and Eleanor pulled out the derringer with shaking hands. Stay back, she warned. The lead man laughed. You going to shoot all 3 of us with that little pea shooter? Come quietly, and we will take you back to Kingston unharmed. Hayes just wants to talk to you. Hayes wants me dead, and we both know it. Maybe so, the man agreed. But you are going to come with us either way. A gunshot cracked through the air, and dust exploded at the man's feet. He jumped back with a curse, and Eleanor looked up to see Isaac standing at the mouth of the alley, his revolver smoking. Ben was beside him, rifle raised and pointed at the other two men. The lady said, "Stay back," Isaac said conversationally. "I suggest you listen." "This is none of your business, cowboy," the lead man blustered, though he made no move to draw his own weapon. "I am making it my business." Isaac walked forward slowly, his gun never wavering. "You have 3 seconds to clear out." 1. The men looked at each other. 2. They broke and ran, disappearing into the confusion of the mining town. Isaac lowered his gun and reached Eleanor in 3 long strides. "Are you hurt?" "No, I am sorry. They were waiting. I should have been more careful." Eleanor realized she was shaking again, adrenaline flooding her system. "Did you get what you came for?" Ben asked, already watching the alley entrance for more trouble. "Yes, I think so." Eleanor explained her conversation with Garrett. "I do not know if he will help, but I planted the seed." "Then we need to leave now." Isaac took her arm and led her quickly through the back streets of Silver Springs. They reached their horses and mounted up, leaving town at a quick trot that would not draw attention, but still put distance between them and any pursuit. They rode hard for the rest of the day, pushing deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew more difficult, the trail winding up through pine forests that smelled sharp and clean after the dusty desert. The air grew cooler, almost cold when the sun began to set, and Eleanor found herself grateful for the heavier clothing Ben had procured. That night, they made camp in a grove of aspens beside a rushing stream. Isaac finally allowed a small fire, and Ben cooked a proper meal of beans and bacon that tasted like heaven to Eleanor's empty stomach. They ate in tired silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and the water rushing over stones. "We are about a day and a half from Carson City," Isaac said as they cleaned up after dinner. "If we can get through tomorrow without trouble, we might actually make it." "Hayes will not give up," Eleanor said. "You know that." "I know. But we have the advantage now. We are ahead of him, and the mountains favor people who know how to use them." Isaac sat beside her on a fallen log, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Besides, we have something he does not." "What is that?" "We are right, and sometimes, when it really matters, that makes all the difference." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "I hope you are right." Isaac's arm came around her, and she felt his lips brush the top of her head. "Get some rest. I will take first watch." "Wake me when it is my turn," Eleanor said, but sleep was already pulling at her. She did not remember lying down, only Isaac's voice murmuring that she should sleep, that he would keep her safe. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Eleanor believed it completely. She woke to the gray light of pre-dawn and the sound of voices. For a disoriented moment, she thought they were under attack, but then she recognized Ben's gravelly tones and another voice, older and unfamiliar. She sat up to see Ben and Isaac talking to a man in his 50s, wearing traveling clothes and a clerical collar. "I am telling you, Father, it is not safe," Isaac was saying. "Hayes has men all through these mountains." "Then you will provide me with even better protection," the priest replied calmly. He had a round, pleasant face and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I am Father Michael Sullivan, and I am traveling to Carson City to deliver my testimony to the territorial governor regarding certain land irregularities. From what you have told me, I believe we have a common destination and perhaps a common enemy." Eleanor stood and approached the group. "Father Sullivan? What land irregularities?" The priest turned to her with a gentle smile. "You must be Miss Donovan. Your friends have explained your situation. To answer your question, I have been collecting testimony from homesteaders and small ranchers who have been cheated out of their land by a network of corrupt officials and land speculators. The name Cornelius Hayes features prominently in my investigation." Eleanor's heart leaped. "You have evidence against Hayes?" "I have testimonies, documents, proof that he and his associates have been systematically stealing from honest people for years." Father Sullivan gestured to the pack mule tethered beside his horse, all carefully recorded and ready to present to the authorities. Then we are definitely traveling together, Isaac decided. 4 people are harder to ambush than 3, especially when one of them is a priest. Even Hayes might think twice about killing a man of God. They broke camp quickly and were on the trail within the hour. Father Sullivan proved to be an excellent traveling companion, with a seemingly endless supply of stories and a gentle humor that lightened the tension. He also proved surprisingly capable with the rifle he carried, mentioning casually that he had served as a chaplain during the war and learned to defend himself and his flock. The day passed without incident, the trail winding ever higher into the mountains. They saw other travelers occasionally, miners heading to the diggings or freight wagons hauling supplies, but no one paid them particular attention. Eleanor began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they would reach Carson City safely. That hope lasted until mid-afternoon when they rounded a bend in the trail and found their way blocked by 8 mounted men. And standing in the center of the group, looking tired and furious, was Cornelius Hayes himself. "Miss Donovan," Hayes said with false pleasantness, "what a chase you have led us on. I must commend your persistence, even as I lament your foolishness." Isaac moved his horse to place himself between Eleanor and Hayes, his hand resting on his revolver. "The lady has no wish to speak with you, Hayes. Move aside." "I am afraid I cannot do that." Hayes's eyes were cold. "Miss Donovan has stolen my property, and I have every right to recover it. As for you, Mr. Quinn, you have interfered with the law, assaulted deputized officers, and aided a fugitive. Your friend is well. I am well within my rights to have you both shot." "Try it," Ben growled, raising his rifle. "Gentlemen, please." Father Sullivan rode forward, positioning his horse beside Isaac's. "I am Father Michael Sullivan, and I must inform you that any violence against these people will be witnessed and reported to the territorial authorities. Furthermore, Mr. Hayes, I have been investigating you for some time, and I believe the question of who is the actual criminal here is very much in doubt." Hayes's face darkened. "Stay out of this, priest. This is not church business. When corruption and violence threaten innocent people, it very much becomes church business." Father Sullivan's voice remained calm, but carried an edge of steel. "Let us pass, and we can sort this matter out properly in Carson City with the proper authorities. The only authority that matters is mine." Hayes snapped. "I own this territory. I own the law. I own everything and everyone worth owning." He gestured to his men. "Take them. Kill the men if they resist. I want the woman and the ledgers alive." Everything happened at once. Hayes's men drew their weapons, and Isaac's revolver was already clearing leather. Ben's rifle cracked, and one of Hayes's men tumbled from his saddle. Then the world erupted in gunfire and chaos. Isaac shot twice, and 2 more men went down. Eleanor pulled out her derringer and fired at a man aiming at Isaac, the small gun's bark lost in the larger cacophony. She missed, but the shot made the man flinch, and his bullet went wide. Father Sullivan, to her amazement, calmly shot a man trying to circle around them, his aim steady and true, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Isaac took a bullet in his left arm and nearly fell from his horse. Ben was bleeding from a graze across his temple, and then Eleanor felt a crushing impact in her side and realized with distant shock that she had been shot. She would have fallen if Isaac had not grabbed her, pulling her across his saddle even as he wheeled his horse around. "Ride!" he shouted. "Father, Ben, ride!" They plunged off the trail and into the forest, crashing through underbrush with Hayes's remaining men in pursuit. Eleanor could barely think through the pain radiating from her side, could barely hold on to Isaac's horse as they careened down a steep slope. She heard more gunshots, heard men shouting, and then they were splashing through a creek and climbing the opposite bank. "There!" Father Sullivan pointed to a cluster of boulders and fallen trees. "We can ford up there." They reached the makeshift shelter and dismounted, Ben and Father Sullivan immediately taking up defensive positions, while Isaac lowered Eleanor gently to the ground. "Let me see," he said urgently, his face pale beneath the dust and sweat. Eleanor's side was on fire, and when she looked down, she saw blood soaking through her dress. "It hurts," she said stupidly. I know, I know." Isaac's hands were gentle as he examined the wound. "It went through. That is good. We can pack it, stop the bleeding." His voice was steady, but she could see fear in his eyes. Father Sullivan appeared beside them with a canteen and strips of cloth torn from his spare shirt. "I have some medical training," he said. "Let me help." Together they cleaned and bandaged Eleanor's wound while Ben kept watch. The bullet had entered just below her ribs and exited through her back, missing anything vital by what felt like inches. The pain was excruciating, and Eleanor bit her lip until it bled to keep from crying out. "You are going to be fine," Isaac kept saying, like a prayer. "You are going to be fine." "They will come for us," Eleanor managed to say through gritted teeth. "Let them." Isaac checked his revolver, reloading with quick, practiced movements. "I am not letting Hayes take you." Hayes's men appeared at the edge of the clearing, moving cautiously now after their earlier casualties. Eleanor counted 4 of them plus Hayes himself. The odds were almost even, but she was wounded and Isaac's left arm was useless. It did not look good. "Quinn!" Hayes called from behind a tree. "This is pointless. Give me the woman and the ledgers, and the rest of you can go free. I give you my word." "Your word is worth less than the dirt under my boots," Isaac shouted back. "Come and take her if you can." A tense standoff developed, neither side willing to make the first move. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, and Eleanor realized darkness would help them if they could just hold out. Hayes must have realized it too, because he suddenly stood and walked into the open, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. "A parley," he called. "Just you and me, Quinn. Let us settle this like civilized men." "There is nothing civilized about you, Hayes." "Perhaps not, but I am a practical man, and I can see this situation is costing me more than it is worth." Hayes moved closer, stopping about 20 feet away. "Here's my final offer. Give me the ledgers. Keep the girl. I will disappear into Mexico, and you will never see me again." "The ledgers are the only thing keeping us alive," Isaac said flatly. "You will kill us all the moment you have them. Maybe. But you have another option." Hayes smiled, and it was a terrible thing. "The girl lives but comes with me. The rest of you go free with the ledgers. Take them to Carson City. Expose whoever you want. By the time the law catches up with me, I will be long gone, and Miss Donovan will be my guarantee of safe passage." "No," Eleanor said, trying to sit up despite the pain. "Isaac, do not even consider it." "I am not," Isaac said firmly. "Your proposal is rejected, Hayes." Hayes's smile vanished. "Then you are all dead." He turned and walked back toward the trees, and Eleanor saw his men raising their weapons. What happened next was something Eleanor would remember for the rest of her life. Father Sullivan stood up from behind the boulder, his arms spread wide. "Stop," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "I am a priest of the Catholic Church, and I am placing all of you under the judgment of God." Amazingly, the men hesitated. Father Sullivan continued speaking, his words pouring out in a mixture of scripture and condemnation. "You cannot hide from justice. Your crimes are written in heaven, and no amount of gold will buy your redemption. Stand down now, confess your sins, and you may yet save your immortal souls." It should not have worked. These were hard men, killers, and criminals who cared nothing for religion. But Father Sullivan spoke with such conviction, such absolute certainty, that something in them faltered. One man lowered his gun, then another. Hayes saw his control slipping and made a desperate move. He drew a hidden pistol and aimed at Father Sullivan. Isaac was faster. His shot took Hayes in the chest, and the corrupt land baron fell backward into the dirt, his pistol unfired. The remaining men stared at Hayes's body, then at each other. Without a word, they mounted their horses and rode away, abandoning their fallen employer without a second thought. The sudden silence was deafening. "Is it over?" Eleanor asked weakly. "It is over," Isaac confirmed, kneeling beside her again. His hand found hers and squeezed gently. "You did it, Eleanor. Hayes is dead. His organization will collapse without him." "We did it," Eleanor corrected. "All of us." Father Sullivan came over, his face grave. "Miss Donovan needs proper medical care. We are still a day from Carson City, but there is a way station about 2 hours north of here. They have a doctor who treats the miners. We need to get her there now." They fashioned a litter from branches and rope, and Ben rigged it to drag behind one of the horses. The journey to the way station was agony for Eleanor, every jolt sending fresh waves of pain through her side. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of Isaac riding beside her, holding her hand, talking to her constantly to keep her awake. The way station materialized out of the gathering darkness like a miracle. The doctor was a gruff older man who had seen his share of gunshot wounds. He cleaned Eleanor's injury properly, stitched what needed stitching, and gave her laudanum for the pain. "She is lucky," he told Isaac. "Another inch and it would have hit her liver. She will recover, but she needs rest and no more excitement." They stayed at the way station for 3 days while Eleanor regained her strength. Isaac barely left her side, sleeping on the floor beside her bed and waking at her smallest sound. When her fever broke on the second day, he wept silently with relief. On the fourth day, they completed the journey to Carson City. Eleanor's aunt, Martha, met them at her home on the outskirts of the territorial capital. She was a thin, energetic woman in her 50s who took one look at Eleanor and immediately took charge, installing her niece in a comfortable guest room and shooing everyone else out. But Eleanor would not rest until the ledgers were safely delivered to the proper authorities. That afternoon, supported by Isaac on one side and Father Sullivan on the other, she walked into the office of Territorial Attorney James Morrison and placed the evidence on his desk. Morrison, a stern man with a reputation for incorruptibility, spent 2 hours reviewing the documents while Eleanor, Isaac, Ben, and Father Sullivan waited. Finally, he looked up. "This is extraordinary," he said simply. "Miss Donovan, you have exposed corruption on a scale I have rarely seen. With this evidence and Father Sullivan's testimonies, we can clean out a nest of criminals that has been poisoning this territory for years." "Hayes is dead," Eleanor said. "But there are others. The sheriff in Kingston, mine foreman, land office officials. All their names are in those ledgers. And they will all be arrested and prosecuted," Morrison promised. "You have done a great service, Miss Donovan, and you, gentlemen, have my personal gratitude for protecting her and this evidence." The story broke in the Carson City newspapers within days. Eleanor's aunt's husband, the editor, made sure every detail was published, and the scandal rocked Nevada territory. Sheriff Bradley fled to California, but was captured and brought back to face trial. Garrett, the mine foreman in Silver Springs, turned himself in and testified against his co-conspirators. By the end of the month, more than 30 officials and businessmen had been arrested. Eleanor stayed with her aunt to recover, and Isaac found work at a nearby ranch so he could be close to her. He visited every day, bringing flowers from the market and news of the ongoing investigations. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, and Eleanor fell more deeply in love with him with each passing day. 6 weeks after the confrontation in the mountains, Eleanor was well enough to go for walks. One evening, Isaac took her to a park overlooking the city as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They sat on a bench beneath a cottonwood tree, and Isaac took her hand. "Eleanor," he said, his voice serious, "I know this has all happened fast. I know we met under the worst possible circumstances, but I meant what I said in the desert. I want to court you properly. I want to build a life with you. I have fallen in love with you completely and utterly, and I need you to know that." Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you drew your gun on that corrupt sheriff. You risked everything for me, a stranger. How could I not love someone like that? Isaac pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and sweet. Then, when you are fully healed, when all the trials are over and things have settled, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you happy? Yes, Eleanor said without hesitation. Yes, Isaac Quinn, I will marry you. They married 6 months later, in the spring of 1879, in a small church in Carson City, with Father Sullivan officiating. Eleanor wore a dress of ivory silk that her aunt had made, and Isaac wore a new suit that he was clearly uncomfortable in, but endured for her sake. Ben stood as his best man, and Martha stood with Eleanor. The ceremony was simple and beautiful, and when Isaac kissed his bride, everyone in the church cheered. They homesteaded land about 10 miles outside Carson City, building a small ranch that they ran together. Isaac worked with the cattle while Eleanor kept the books and managed their business affairs, her sharp mind and attention to detail ensuring they prospered. They were partners in everything, sharing work and decisions equally. Their first child, a boy they named Thomas after Eleanor's father, was born in the spring of 1880. He had Isaac's dark hair and Eleanor's blue eyes, and they both fell hopelessly in love with him. A daughter, Sarah, followed 2 years later, and then another son, William, in 1884. The ranch grew steadily, and so did their reputation for honest dealing and fair treatment of their workers. Isaac was elected to the local school board, and Eleanor became known throughout the territory as an advocate for women's property rights and education. She wrote articles for her uncle's newspaper, using her experience with Hayes's corruption to argue for stronger oversight of territorial officials. Ben stayed with them, becoming like a member of the family. He built his own small cabin on their land and helped raise their children, teaching them to ride and rope and live off the land. Father Sullivan visited regularly, becoming godfather to all three children and a trusted advisor. In 1885, Nevada achieved statehood, and Eleanor was invited to speak at the celebration about the importance of honest government. Standing on a stage in Carson City with Isaac beside her, she told the story of how corruption had nearly destroyed her life and how courage and love had saved it. The speech was reprinted in newspapers across the new state. Years passed, each one adding new layers to their life together. Their children grew up strong and healthy, educated and confident. Thomas became a lawyer, determined to fight for justice like his mother had. Sarah became a teacher, passionate about educating girls and women. William took over the ranch, partnering with his aging father to expand their operations. On their 25th wedding anniversary, in 1904, Isaac and Eleanor sat on the porch of the house they had built together, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Their hair was gray now, their faces lined with the marks of hard work and laughter, but their love had only deepened with time. "Do you ever regret it?" Isaac asked, his arm around her shoulders. "That day you stepped into my path and turned both our lives upside down?" Eleanor leaned into his embrace, comfortable and content. "Not for a single second. You saved my life, Isaac Quinn. And then you made it worth living." "We saved each other," Isaac corrected. "You gave me purpose, something to fight for. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to be better than I was. I was just drifting before you. Now I am exactly where I am meant to be." They sat in companionable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear their children and grandchildren, gathered to celebrate the anniversary. There was laughter and music, the sounds of a family that had been built on love and trust and shared sacrifice. "Tell us the story again, Grandpa," their oldest grandson called from inside. "The story of how you and Grandma met." Isaac looked at Eleanor and smiled. "Should we?" "We should," she agreed. "But this time, you tell it." They went inside together, hand in hand as they had been for 25 years, as they would be for all the years remaining to them. And Isaac began the story the way he always did, with the truth that had become their family legend. It started with a woman who was brave enough to fight corruption, he said. His children and grandchildren gathered around him, and a cowboy who was fool enough to help her. And it turned into the greatest adventure of my life. Eleanor sat beside him, her hand in his, and added her own truth. It started with a man who saw someone in trouble and chose to help, even when it meant putting himself in danger. And it turned into the greatest love story I could have imagined. They told the story together, finishing each other's sentences, embellishing details they both remembered and laughing at the parts that still seemed impossible, even after all these years. And when the story was finished, when they reached the part about the wedding and the ranch and the family they had built, their grandchildren begged for more. But Isaac and Eleanor just smiled at each other, their eyes holding all the untold stories of 25 years together. The quiet moments and the hard times, the triumphs and the failures, the ordinary days that had woven themselves into an extraordinary life. The best part of the story, Eleanor told the children, is that it is not over yet. Every day is a new chapter, and we get to write it together. Isaac raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, the same gesture he had made 1,000 times before and would make 1,000 times more. Forever, he said simply. Forever, Eleanor agreed. And outside, the Nevada night spread its blanket of stars across the sky, watching over a family that had been forged in danger and perfected in love. The corruption that had once threatened to destroy them was long gone, brought down by courage and integrity. The cowboy and the bookkeeper had become ranchers, parents, pillars of their community. But more than that, they had become the answer to each other's prayers, the completion of each other's souls. In the years that followed, they would face new challenges and celebrate new joys. They would bury Ben, who died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by the family he had helped protect. They would welcome more grandchildren and then great-grandchildren. They would see the 20th century transform the world they had known, bringing automobiles and electricity and changes they could never have imagined. But through it all, Isaac and Eleanor Quinn remained constants in each other's lives. They woke each morning grateful for another day together. They worked side by side, building not just a ranch, but a legacy of honesty and love. They grew old together with grace and humor, their love not dimming but transforming, becoming something deeper and more precious than the passionate romance of their youth. When Isaac died in 1920, at the age of 67, Eleanor held his hand and thanked him for every day they had shared. He smiled at her, his eyes still that same striking green, and told her he would wait for her wherever souls went when their earthly journey was done. His last words were her name, spoken with all the love of 41 years together. Eleanor lived another 8 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the values she and Isaac had instilled. She spent her final years writing her memoirs, determined that the story of fighting corruption and finding love would not be forgotten. The book was published in 1927 and became a bestseller throughout the West, inspiring a new generation to stand up for what was right. She died peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1928, and her family buried her beside Isaac on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. On her gravestone, beneath her name and dates, they inscribed the words she had requested. She fought corruption with courage. She found love with a cowboy. She lived a life of purpose and joy. And beside it, Isaac's stone bore its own inscription. He helped a stranger. He found a soulmate. He lived a life of honor and devotion. The ranch passed to William and his children, and it prospered for generations, a testament to the foundation Isaac and Eleanor had built. The story of their meeting, their flight through the desert, their battle against corruption became part of Nevada folklore, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But those who had known them, who had seen the way they looked at each other even after decades of marriage, who had witnessed the quiet devotion and fierce partnership that defined their relationship, knew that no legend could capture the full truth of what they had shared. They had been two people brought together by danger and circumstance who chose to transform that beginning into something beautiful and lasting. They had built a life based on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that never wavered through good times and hard. They had raised children who carried forward their commitment to justice and integrity. They had made their corner of the world better simply by being in it together. And in the end, that was the real story. Not the dramatic chase through the desert or the gunfight in the mountains, thrilling as those were. The real story was the decades of ordinary days, of breakfast together and evening walks, of shared laughter and mutual support. The real story was the choice they made every single day to love each other, to honor each other, to build a life together that mattered. Eleanor's knowledge of corruption had indeed made her a target, just as the old story said. And Isaac Quinn, the cowboy who chose to help her, had become an even bigger target in the eyes of those who profited from dishonesty and greed. But together, they had been more than targets. They had been warriors for justice, partners in every sense, and living proof that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the ranch that still bore the Quinn name, in the laws that had been changed because of the corruption Eleanor exposed, and in the countless lives they had touched through their example of integrity and devotion. And sometimes, on quiet spring evenings, when the desert wind blew soft across the Nevada hills, people claimed they could see two figures walking hand in hand near the old Quinn ranch house. A tall man with dark hair and a woman with her head on his shoulder, still together as they had been in life, still writing new chapters of their endless love story. The ranch hands and family members who reported these sightings could never quite agree on the details, but they all agreed on one thing. The figures were always smiling, always peaceful, always obviously and completely in love, because that was the truth of Isaac and Eleanor Quinn. Corruption had brought them together. Danger had tested them, but love had sustained them through everything. They had fought for justice and won. They had built a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. And most importantly, they had found in each other the completion they had been seeking all their lives. Their story, which began with a desperate woman and a cowboy brave enough to help her, ended exactly as all the best love stories should, with two souls united forever, their love transcending even death, their legacy living on in every person who ever heard their tale and was inspired to be braver, kinder, more devoted. The corruption Eleanor discovered in 1878 had been destroyed. The criminals had been brought to justice. But the love that she and Isaac created from those terrible beginnings, that love had proved immortal, echoing through time as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when facing the worst humanity has to offer, love can still triumph, honor can still win, and two people who choose each other, who fight for each other, who build a life together based on respect and devotion, can create something that will outlast them both. That was the true end of their story, and the true beginning of their legend. Eleanor Donovan and Isaac Quinn, the bookkeeper and the cowboy, whose knowledge of corruption and courage in the face of danger led them to something far more valuable than justice or revenge. It led them to each other and to a love that would echo through the generations as proof that the best stories, the truest stories, are always the ones written by two hearts beating as one.